Hello, I'm Richard Parker and welcome to the latest edition of Let's Explore in 2020 from Webfleet Solutions. Really pleased to welcome everyone here today watching and hope that by the end of this session you will know a little bit more about eLCVs from our illustrious panel and what it's really like to run these vehicles in today's environment. So we're really fortunate today to have insight from Renault, Vanarama and SSE. So without further ado, I'll pass you over and just let them introduce themselves.
Thanks, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the one enjoying the Christmas festivities a little earlier this year, but I guess we're allowed to after the rubbish year we all dealt with. So as it says on the screen, hopefully, it says Jonny Berry, and I work in the fleet department for Groupe Renault in the UK. And I specialise in battery electric vehicle sales, and I'm always keen to engage with our network, dealer network, private and public sector fleets, leasing companies, etc. And I'm also the proud founder of the EV Cafe like this, which is a regular webinar series that we've been running during lockdown. Thank you.
Paul?
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Kirby. I'm the head of LCV and EV strategy for Vanarama. I've been doing vans for about 17 years and I'm quite a keen fan of vans. Hashtag VanGeek, do feel free to follow me. I've been making a general nuisance of myself within the eLCV market for about the last 3 years or so. But my goal is really just to help people get into electric vehicles, make it easier for companies to adopt electric vehicles. And I'm privileged too to be one of the early members of the EV Cafe, so very excited to have been working with Jonny on that and also on this too. So look forward to talking vans today, it's exciting.
Neil?
Hi everybody, Neil Chamberlain from SSE. I am the National EV Manager. So in essence, my role is to transition from a combustion engine driven fleet at the moment across to, although my job title says EV, it's actually to alternative fuels, and we'll come into that. I guess Paul will bring some of that up as he goes through his presentations. I've been in the automotive industry for 15-ish years now, maybe a little bit more. I've worked in everything from a leasing company to an OEM and a couple of end users. So hopefully today I can bring some of that, some of those learnings that we've had on our initial trials and our journey across to EV. I haven't been a regular member of EV Cafe. I haven't even got a cup or a mug because they won't send me one, which is really unfortunate. But thank you. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Neil. Now, just before we move over into Jonny's first session, I'd like to invite you all to keep an eye on your panel, on your webinar, and please, we're inviting lots of questions in for today. It really is trying to get to be a discussion about what the reality is running these vehicles in today's environment. Now's your chance to really drill these three guys in terms of each of their specialisms. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Jonny now for his presentation, but please ask those questions as we're going through, and we will have sessions throughout the webinar in terms of asking these questions. All right.
Thank you very much, Richard. I've had to actually take my jacket off. It's a bit warm in my office today. So it gives me great pleasure to give you a whistle-stop tour on our electric commercial vehicle offering today from our Pro Plus range. The only vehicle that you see on the screen here that's missing is the picture of our Twizy cargo, but I will just pretend for the time being that it's hiding in the back of the Master. That means we can really demonstrate the sort of breadth of our range, that we can fit the smallest inside the biggest, and also show that we actually have the widest offering of eLCV than any other manufacturer, and crucially with no supply constraints. So I want to take this opportunity to give you a bit of a product update. And to start off, I want to talk to you about the latest arrival in our lineup, the vehicle hiding behind the 𝐥𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧𝐢𝐧𝐠𝐬 on the left, which is the all-new Zoe van. It is available to demo now, and it's proving to be an incredibly popular choice for fleets. And that's because, because it delivers across four key elements. It's at the forefront of EV performance and range, same powerful motor, charging and battery as the car, therefore offering a 245 miles worth of range. It of course delivers car refinement with all the latest convenience technologies to make those longer journeys as comfortable as possible. It also includes the latest safety features for added peace of mind, but crucially, all important load space. So overall payload is 457 kilograms. It's available in 1 cubic meter load space, which replaces the rear seats, of course. There are 4 anchorage points to secure items down safely and securely, mesh bulkhead to protect the driver and passenger from the load, and a hard-wearing rubber flooring and reinforced load area compartment cover. It is also just worth noting that the van retains the rear doors of the passenger car to allow easier access to any items placed in the rear load space behind the front seats without having to lean right over. So, alongside the all-new Renault Zoe van, we were also pleased to launch this year the new Renault Master ZE 3.5-ton model, which will be available on panel van, chassis cab and platform cab versions. This new version can provide an additional 375 kilograms of payload, bringing the model up to the benchmark of many of its ICE rivals. Sorry for saying ICE, I know we've got some acronym police here, but internal combustion engine rivals. As well as introducing another option for buyers alongside the already established 3.1-ton version that we launched back in 2018. So most importantly, we can now offer an incredibly diverse range of products with the added weight and the new body options for the chassis cab. So as an example, as you can see on the screen here, Master ZE equipped with a 20 cubic meter large volume box, model construction body on the back, and a tail lift still guarantees 1,000 kilograms worth of payload. So next up is our Kangoo ZE 33, available in both medium and long wheelbase panel vans. The Kangoo ZE retains the 33 kilowatt hour battery and 44 kilowatt powerful motor for the same 143 miles WLTP, while still offering 2 versions of crew van, one of which with a fixed row of seats and the other which includes cab in the name that actually has multi-locational bulkhead and seats for maximum versatility. The payload range is anywhere from 605 to 640 kilograms and enough space to accommodate a British or Euro pallet. This is one of the most popular electric vans in Europe, and it has 46% market share. It's been around since 2012. Therefore, we think tried and tested technology, and this image as an example is Southampton City Council's fleet, of whom their fleet manager still drives an older generation 2012 Kangoo ZE, and most recently took a delivery of what you see on the screen, which is about 24 vehicles. They have also tried other products, but in terms of proven technology, price, load and performance, the Kangoo ZE are fitted for their fleets and their operations. So that's kind of a quick update on our product range. You don't always have to pay the premium for driving an EV, not always the case. So as you can see here on the screen, our latest cost comparison between our ICE version, internal combustion engine version, sorry, acronym police, and our electric version. The rentals don't need to be offset in this case by any other savings because they are now in parity according to RCI Finance. So it gives them kind of an even playing field. Therefore, savings can start from day one, and even favouring the ICE with miles per gallon, high miles per gallon, etc., and only 10,000 miles per annum, there could be a potential saving of £5,378 over this kind of term and this profile. Not to mention any other ULEZ charges or incoming ULEZ charges and stuff like that. I think most leasing companies now that we speak to agree that Kangoo ZE is probably one of the cheapest, is the cheapest ELCV in terms of TCO, and cheaper than any van by the time you factor in 1 or 2 ULEZ or congestion charges in that month. And so it wouldn't be right for me just to talk about contract hire, but also outright purchase. So as an example, but using the Zoe van, however, you can clearly see on the left-hand side, if you draw your eyes to the left-hand side, that the basic price is much higher than the Ford Fiesta. But after taking RV, depreciation, fuel, SMR, VED costs into consideration, there is still a substantial saving to be had, and it will only again increase if you are to use it in congestion or ULEZ or pending zones. For example, only yesterday I was comparing this the Zoe van to an actual Toyota Aygo for a big fleet customer for Renault, and they stood to save £7,500 in fuel costs in just over 3 years for one vehicle. Unfortunately, they didn't really want to know about the CO2 saving, but in my eyes, that's equally important to share. This comparison you see on the screen was calculated by slightly favouring the Fiesta with a high miles per gallon again and what you pay at the pump, and not so favouring the Zoe van with a range of 200 miles all year round and a standard UK tariff electric at a cost of about 15 pence per kilowatt hour. And then on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see that it's also a good news story for Renault Zoe van for residual values as well. So when Renault is presented up against what we think is its main competitor, the Fiesta van as an example, the Zoe van, according to CAT, has an uplift of 10% after 36 months and 60,000 miles. So I'd imagine a lot of you remember NEDC, the way of measuring vehicles. Well, I used to say that should stand for not even distinctly close, and it was even more prevalent when it came to EVs. So at least now with WLTP, it is possible to achieve, with some of our customers overachieving, but in certain circumstances. However, upon all of my conversations, I always direct our customers and prospects to our website, which helps you understand how real-world range is achieved and calculated. So by taking into consideration outside temperature, the speed, load, whether you've got the heating or AC on, but don't forget there is also the factor of topography and driving styles. So as an example, as you can see on the screen, half load driving at 30 miles per hour, perhaps in a city centre with eco and AC on, in the summertime should see a return of 150 miles in between charges. Obviously not taking into account regenerative braking, but that would also help with the range. On the other end of the spectrum, higher speeds, topography will deplete the battery much faster, but we don't see much of an impact from bigger payloads though. Because we have been selling EVs for the last decade, we have plenty of data to show that they outlast the usable life of the vehicle. Not to say there's anything wrong with the vehicle, but as you can see on the graph here, 99.5% of the batteries are above the 70% warranty threshold even after 10 years. This isn't just our data. Some others have stated that 𝐥𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧𝐢𝐬𝐴 has outperformed when compared to some other vehicles as an average. From all different major makes and models, and over anywhere between 2 and 6 year lifespan, which is great news for Renault and Renault Kangoo. We actually expect a minimum of 10 years life in a vehicle, then a further 15 years as static storage. And because we are coming up to 10 years, we can also prove this. So no need to throw away the battery. It is still very much a valuable asset. Oh, I've gone too far there. How do I go back? There we go. So here are 2 new energy storage projects located in West Sussex, comprising of 1,000 second life Renault Kangoo batteries, from which will be used alongside other technologies as part of a local energy system to help provide cleaner and lower cost energy for the use in social housing, transport infrastructure, private homes and local businesses. So just to kind of wrap things up a bit, so I'm conscious of time, 10 years in EV, but because of time, I will talk to you about our experience in our 10 years in EV while sharing my finishing video for you, which is taken from our EZ concept range. And it's the EZ Pro, which is a multi-purpose electric, of course, autonomous future. So just to highlight some key facts about Renault, we are still Europe's best-selling electric vehicle manufacturer to date and all time. We aim to maintain that position in an ever more competitive landscape. Employee excellence is an important thing. We do have trained and experienced EV sales and service staff, so we believe this could be a huge advantage over our competitors who are only just launching EVs today. Battery pack, we are investing in battery tech heavily, ensuring consistent supply, working on second usage projects such as static storage, as I just briefly mentioned. Technical excellence, Zoe van is built from the ground up to be an EV. We have years of experience in manufacturing EVs with strong reliability record. That's me done. So thanks for listening. Happy to take some questions. Feel free to reach out. Find me on LinkedIn or shoot me over an email, no problem at all. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Jonny. I particularly like that futuristic video at the end. We'll all be driving around.
It's questionable whether you needed such a big vehicle to transport just a small vase, I would say.
A couple of quick questions that have come in whilst you've been talking. What's in store from Renault for 2021?
Okay, so in 2021, it is of course an immediate priority for us right now to electrify all of our core models. And what we're going to see in 2021 as well is a brand new subsidiary company of the group and the wider alliance called 𝐥𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧𝐢𝐬, which are there to support our fleet customers with turnkey charging solutions, and of course advice as well. So there are, I can't say more about what products, but rest assured that any new products will have sort of an idea on electrified or electric model. But watch this space.
Fantastic. Conscious of time and making sure we get Paul on next. Second question though has come in. Second life storage project, is it up and running yet?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. Based not so far away from me, actually, in West Sussex. But those images, I think they're actually photographs, not computer-generated images. So not that I've been to see it, but I'd very much like to.
Okay, and one very other quick one then that's just dropped in. Any plans to electrify the Renault Traffic?
Yes. In terms, I'm unable to share that timeline of what the vehicle will look like right now, because of course we have 𝐥𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧𝐢𝐬𝐴, which is a little bit smaller than Traffic, and we of course have the smaller wheelbase 𝐼𝐺𝐸 as an option. So unfortunately, we won't be sharing any information until we're ready to launch that product. But yeah, rest assured, when new Traffic comes, I'm sure there'll be a version there for zero emissions.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Of course, we'll be back on later with more generic questions as they come in. So I'm going to hand over to Paul now, and he's going to give us a view from Vanarama's perspective and total cost of ownership.
Hey everybody. So I want to talk. I mean, Johnny's already covered a little bit about total cost of ownership, and I'm not going to disagree with him. You'll be pleased to hear. So my concern was our commercial vehicles a viable option, and we can look at that both from a financial point of view, but also from a practical point of view. I think it's worth considering those things. So sorry, let me just get the mouse to move. Oh, there we go. Typical. Moved on too quickly. Right, now it won't go back. Hey, there we go. Right, so this is what we're going to cover. The market in a nutshell, as you've just seen. The vehicles that are available, that were available at the beginning of the year and are now available. So just to see that transition. Also, what factors do we need to consider and total cost of ownership, and some specific examples around use case viability. Then just some thoughts about how you might evaluate your situation, and then just a quick sum up. So the rise of electric LCVs, well, it's not stratospheric yet, if we're honest. So there was 3,200 registered in 2019, which was a normal year. This year we'd hoped for 8,750, or that was the sort of industry kind of talk, that there would be about that many. Although there was 800 registered in September, it's more likely to be somewhere around 4,500 this year. So it's a relatively small percentage, about 1.7% of a smaller number this year, but it is growing, and there is interest for a lot of people. Hence, all the people attending this, and you'll see what's going on in the marketplace. So at the beginning of the year, we'd had the demise of the Berlingo and the Partner. So there was just those two small vans available, the 𝐥𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧𝐢𝐬𝐴 and the EMV200. There was only the 𝑒VTO, and that was only just out, and then the Maxus EV80 and the Master ZE in the larger van sector. But as the year has progressed, you will see that there is a real significant improvement in the vehicles that are available. Now, volume arguably is still not massively high, but there is a good selection of vehicles, and you'll be really pleased to know there is a couple of vehicles in there that will tow, which is really good news, although they're not up to the sort of 2.8, 3.5 tons that many operations need, and we'll come on to that in a short while. So a good selection of vehicles there, some new vehicles to market, and then some really good ranges on there as well. And we like right towards the end, we'll consider, you know, what sort of data is out there to look at the average journeys of all of you and of many other people, both here and around Europe. So it's really important that we take the whole landscape into account, the factors to consider. Vans equate to about 16% of all traffic on the road, and if you look out your window at the moment, it's vans that are driving up to your local residents, delivering the parcels. This is one of the key drivers and has driven the growth in the van sector over the last number of years. As I say, it's been the fastest growing sector of all the different sectors of trucks and cars and so on. So, but vans contribute 30% of the UK nitrogen dioxide emissions, the bad stuff, right? So this is the things that directly affect the air quality, which ultimately has led to up to 40,000 deaths per annum. So we need to do something about this, and there are grants available, and there's grants for home and workplace charging, so that's really good news to help get you going. But you know, the reality is you need to get started now, because in the case of the ban now on full wholly petrol or diesel engines by 2030, that could be just as low as 2 life cycles for some of you. And what's really impressive is also the Clean Van Commitment, which is Global Action Plan Clean Van Commitment. And these are some of the signatories that are signed up to having a fully electric fleet by 2028, which I am really impressed by. And I know that all of the guys on this this slide here are really, you know, determined and committed to seeing that transition. So, I mean, it forces the OEMs like Jonny and his competitors to think about what are we going to bring to market and how are we going to make a difference and make this work for all of these signatories, because there's a variety of uses in there, from utilities to local councils, parcels, and so on, that really make a difference to our marketplace. And you know, that represents a significant number of vans there that will be going electric by 2028, which is good. So to come to Jonny's point, I've picked a different vehicle, knowing that Jonny would no doubt choose a Renault. I've touched on the EMV200. Now, these are rates that are available in the marketplace. So, you know, I've brought them as leasing rates and factored in the cost of energy at 14p per kilowatt, slightly different to Jonny's, and factored in 12 trips into London in particular, but there are up to 63 clean air zones in planning at the moment, with some due to go live very, very soon, which will directly affect the cost of running vehicles in various different areas. So it's not just about what's there today, it's what's there over the coming months and years that will definitely affect a minimum of 60 areas over the country, and some many more. And you think about London, that's growing, I don't know how many fold exactly, but it's growing to the north and south circulars, so it's a significant change to the charge zones, and electric vehicles of course are exempt. So, but when we just think about the cost, it's not just cost, it is 25% lower accidents is the statistic that insurers are coming up with. They're saying that electric vehicles are involved in accidents 25% less of the time. There are a number of reasons for that, and we can discuss that later. But so ultimately that leads into reduced downtime, but of course there's lower maintenance on the vehicles and a lower likelihood of the vehicle failing in operation, because there's just not as many moving parts. And I will say it's less stressful just to drive an electric vehicle. If you don't believe me, go out and try it. So what are the challenges? We surveyed, as Vanarama, over 1,000 of our customers, our van customers, and this is the word cloud that came out of their feedback. So, you know, they had a free text feedback, and all of these words were featured, but obviously range, miles, cost, some of the high cost of the initial outlay, and we've looked at the total cost of ownership of some of the smaller vehicles. That does change when you get to some of the bigger vehicles, so that is really worth considering. But you know, the amount of time we have to invest in charging and other things like that. So there are many challenges that we need to consider. So how are we going to move this dial forward? You know, on the one hand, you've got the big fleets like we're going to hear from in a second, like SSE, with Neil, and how they're able to invest time. My concern particularly is for the smaller fleets as well, thinking about how do we educate and support those fleets. And so we want to make it easier for people, and it's one of the things that we're doing, but other people I'm sure are doing this. We're putting vans on the road so that people can try them. That's the best way, right? Just to get out there, try it and do it. We're giving people a free home charge point when they do it. So, when there's that question about how do I facilitate my drivers to go electric? Well, here we go. We'll provide a home charger where it's possible. And also there is a question around how do we charge for the fuel? Well, we've partnered with a company called �𝐸𝐴 to provide a structure like that. And so we would encourage you to look out at the various different ways of facilitating and understanding and then sort of getting started. So I just want to quickly cover off the different types of uses. I've got a couple of minutes left. So local authorities are really going for electric vehicles, and areas like Leeds and Kent are actually putting on vehicles for customers, small SMEs, to try, which is fantastic. And Johnny will be very pleased because that's a Renault there. Also deliveries, we all know about deliveries, and that really does work. So electric vehicles will work in local authorities for the majority of the operations, short daily operations coming back to a base. Similar with deliveries in terms of the local deliveries. Trunking is more difficult, but it is still possible for some of the mid-range trunking. For businesses that tow, there is a challenge because the weights that are available with the Vivaro 1,000 kilos and the 𝐥𝐸𝐴𝐶𝐬𝐴 Deliver 9 at 1,500 kilos just aren't enough to facilitate the majority of the major towing operations. So towing is a challenge, but it's one that's being overcome. Fridges, it's often a question I get, can I get an electric fridge? Well, the answer is yes. People have got solutions for driving the fridge through electric use, which is really good news. Civil works, I think, is more of a challenge, and this is where, when we were talking within the BVRLA about, what about vans? What are the challenges to going electric? Well, civil operations can be, because of the amount of power that needs to come out the back of them, sometimes compressors and other things like that. So there is challenges there, but we can always look at them. And then the engineer and the repairers and the tradesmen is probably one of the bigger areas where you can. Medium-sized vans, and we've seen it with major utilities companies placing big orders for electric vans in that medium van sector, which is predominantly this type of use. So there are some really good use cases out there and a lot to be going at and getting started. So I would just encourage that you kind of have a look at doing a proper assessment of what you're doing, and Neil will probably touch on this a bit more, but have a goal, decide when you want to be. Maybe it's the clean van commitment, then have a realistic look at where you are, look at the opportunities that you've got to change, and then do take some action, but also work on some recommendations and feed those through the business so that everybody's getting buy-in. You need buy-in from different people, otherwise you're going to slip up in that process. So good to do some planning in order to do it, but people are there to help you do that. And then ultimately you've got to get started. And if you do get started, my belief is that you will have a safer fleet because the vehicles are easier to drive. They're very much point and shoot. You're putting the driver at the heart of it. You're reducing their stress levels. You're increasing their ability through advanced driver assistance systems, creature comforts such as aircon, and just the ease of pulling out onto roundabouts and out of junctions. Smarter, the vehicles are generally smarter, a lot of data supporting them, and of course Webfleet Solutions can fit stuff in and give you feedback, and ultimately the vehicles are more efficient, and of course they're greener. You can save well over 2 tons of CO2 per annum per vehicle by taking an electric vehicle. So that's my encouragement to you. Get started, have a go, look at what tools are out there to facilitate giving it a go. They are viable, the cost is reasonable. There are some challenges at the higher end and in certain operations, but it's worth getting started. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Paul. That was really insightful, and the questions have been coming in fast and furious. So everybody else still out there, keep encouraging to keep asking these guys questions and pick their brains. But first one for you, Paul. Do you think the cost of mid-sized and larger LCVs will come down, or additional grants will be offered based on the 2030 announcement?
Well, do you know what? I think it's going to take a brave manufacturer to come with a price that reflects, you know, the correct value. I mean, you know, the talk of a rival coming with a vehicle that is priced at its diesel counterparts or diesel competitors is one that I think will drive the market. So I think what we'll see is maybe some new entrants coming to market with a more aggressive pricing strategy, which will force other manufacturers to bring prices down to a more realistic number. You know, I don't know why the costs are so high. You might say battery, you might say a number of other things, but the costs are higher for the mid sectors are getting close. Actually, the mid-sized vans are certainly coming close.
So I suppose the obvious question after that then is which manufacturer do you think is supporting the electrification of LCVs the most at the moment then?
It's a tough one. I mean, Johnny rightly points out that, you know, Renault are doing a lot of work in this space and probably, you know, have a really broad range. Mercedes are doing a really good job, I think. They've certainly courted some big deals, and they're getting some vehicles on the road. You know, the range is a bit of a challenge, but they're fit for certain purposes. So, and I'm pretty impressed with the PSA group. You know, by the end of the next year, they've got their whole range electrified. Then that's definitely a really positive step and one that will support the market.
Excellent, thanks. We're going to go to Neil in a minute, but there's one final question. We'll ask the other questions for you in the panel discussion at the end. But if somebody wants to own up to it, somebody's asked if they can have a Vanarama T-shirt.
If you email me or contact me on LinkedIn, I will send you a Vanarama T-shirt. You can have a choice of black with white or orange with white. Your choice.
Excellent. Right. Fantastic. Right. Thank you. So we're going to hand over to Neil now. This is from SSE's perspective. What's it like to actually bring an EV fleet to fruition, and how's it going to work? So hand it over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Richard. Good afternoon, everybody. I think the place I'd like to start is just to echo both Johnny and Paul's presentations. What that allows you to do is really put those building blocks in to for that transition to actually commence. And Paul actually almost stole my first slide for me, I think, in that he talked about coming up with a concept and knowing where you want to get to, and that was in essence our initial starting point within SSE. So really thinking about what the vision and the purpose and the strategy that we wanted to get to. So if I touch very briefly on the strategy, looking to ensure we've got the right vehicle, the right infrastructure in the right operational environment, and operational is the key word for what I'm going to talk about throughout the rest of the slides. But it's got to be there to deliver the overall strategy of your organization. So for SSE, what are we there to do? What are we there to deliver? And making sure that everything works in line with that. To take that strategy and break it down, we come up with three key areas. The first one being the product, and that's the right vehicle, making sure that those EVs are accessible across the whole of the business. The infrastructure, and we're talking about charging at home, at work, public charging, but also the infrastructure from a software perspective, that back office solution that allows you to control that as you go forward. And then people, and helping to provide the education, the advice, and breaking down those barriers to get to where you need to be. So in SSE, we've been running trials for a period of time now. We've got electric LCVs in a range of environments. You can see the Nissan EMV 200 there, and that's actually on one of our wind farms up north. So you can see that we're looking to spread them across multiple operations. It's not all about just looking at where the easy areas are to fit, because that product needs to work for us in multiple different environments, multiple different areas. So we need to learn as we go forward. And also looking at that infrastructure side of things. So we've installed over 140 chargers. The majority of those are 7 kilowatt chargers. We do have a few 11 and 150 kilowatt charger. Again, experience trying to understand 100% what the trial is going to deliver for us. And one of the most important things, I think, was our production of the frequently asked questions and driver aids, just to ensure that the vehicles and the products that we're delivering out to our drivers are used in the right way. We've touched briefly on a couple of the up and coming challenges, and I'll go through those a little bit more in each of the areas that I'm about to talk about. But limited vehicle availability across some sizes. Paul's obviously highlighted lots of different vehicles. 14 different vehicles are available at this moment in time. Touched on towing. Towing for us is a big element. We utilise our vans to move mini diggers and other civils around. So that's a 3.5 ton mini digger. There isn't anything out there at this moment in time to allow us to do that. The public charging infrastructure, in a national perspective, on the right hand side, there's a national heat map. You can see that if you live down in the south, then that's probably not too bad. There's a few kind of patches in there, but actually up in Scotland, where a good element of our work is involved, it's patchy to say the least. Actually, some of the Scottish Highlands and Islands actually have a better infrastructure than some of the major conurbations. So actually understanding where we can actually deliver a vehicle into based on that national infrastructure. We also have some HGVs and some incredibly specialist vehicles that aren't taken care of at the moment. So we know that we can't deliver everything straight away. So back to that first strategic pillar that I talked about, the product. So we like to think about things in a slightly different way and think about the key considerations. So we've talked about it and sat there and discussed lots of the elements in terms of the range analysis and using the telemetry information that you have available to you to drive out what the average daily, the longest journey, look at a set period of time. So it's not just a week, it's not a month, maybe it's over 3, 6, 12 months. It's a little bit more tricky now with COVID, and I'm sure like SSE, a lot of your fleets will have reduced the amount of mileage they're doing currently. So actually, is it a case of taking it back a year or two to actually look at what was happening at that point? Think about the operational usage of those vehicles, and based on both of those, is there the ability to actually start to look at your fleet in a different way? The number of vehicles, can you reduce the number of vehicles? Can you downsize the size of the van, rather than immediately sitting there and thinking, oh, my driver's in a Sprinter today, for example, let me just procure another Sprinter for them. Actually think about 100% what that van is doing, what it's carrying, what its usage is actually for. Paul touched on the total cost of ownership. You need to transition across from being solely based on the monthly lease cost. That total cost of ownership, bringing into account all the service and maintenance savings that are there. Less moving parts on an electric vehicle, therefore less service and maintenance costs should be applied. The fuel is the biggest saver, naturally, and also look at the length of the lease. A lot of the time, and Jonny talked about it a little bit on that battery length, a lot of vehicles are coming up with 8-year battery warranty and manufacturer's warranties, sorry. And so actually, is it right to extend out what your the length of lease, and therefore actually that total cost of ownership starts to drop right down, and parity is easy to make at that point. One of the things we found is, don't just do a trial, do an operational trial, finding out which vehicle is the right one for the right job role, and look at the environment that it actually operates in. And it drives a different way of thinking for us. So it's, again, I guess the first statement there, providing the right vehicle for the right job at the right price. Yes, it was always about that, but it's no longer thinking like for like. It's no longer thinking that just because an engineer is doing or works in the same team, that he does exactly the same job as the next engineer. So think about that from a range, from a payload, from an environment, whereabouts are they located, and then making sure that at that point you're providing the right tool for the job. There we go. So from a product learning perspective, early engagement with the OEM, talk to the manufacturers that are out there, understand what they've got coming, understand what they want to deliver out into the operational world as well. Operational trials are key, and accept that not everything you can do today, or not everything you want to be able to do today. There's a product out there, there's a van out there, but when you're thinking and making your considerations, have that last statement that zero emissions should be, where at all possible, your first choice. So in an infrastructure side of things, our considerations are around what you're actually putting the operation or the charges in for. Are you installing them so that every company car driver can have a charger, or are you installing them for an operational vehicle perspective? And actually what that means is that when your operational vehicles are out, predominantly over the evening if they're depot based, then could those chargers then be used for your company car drivers? And that's more of a top up as opposed to a full charge is kind of where we come from in SSE. It's also looking at the maximum capacity that you have available at each site. So what is the dwell time for the vehicle? So therefore that drives out which charger you actually need, and to a certain extent what the maximum capacity you're available at at each of one of those sites. And the big thing that we found is it's about getting to a place where you can remove the cost of charge for an operational driver. They need a simple way to charge and a simple way to pay. And that solution needs to work across the geographical location that the driver's are operating in. As we all know, there's probably, especially down south of England, there are so many different providers of public charge points. Actually, you end up traveling around with 3, 4, 5 different charge cards or apps. Actually, make sure that you're delivering the right solution for your drivers at that point. And so that drives that different way of thinking. Operational chargers versus company car chargers. Where does your organization fit on that? The feasibility studies around what the maximum capacity for your depot actually is. Think about that, not just the number of LCVs that go into that, and do the analysis on the vehicle range to understand where charging is actually required. Do you need it at all of your remote depots, or actually if everybody is going through a central hub at some point during that day, is that the right place to put bigger, faster chargers? So our learning so far, it probably sounds quite weird from a utility provider, or maybe not, as the case may be, but install the maximum number of chargers you can per depot. You don't necessarily need to put a charger on top of it, but get the civils and the infrastructure in there. It's the great adage of digging up the road once, and ensure that you've got the right software solution. For us, we're spending quite a long period of time looking at what that software solution needs to be, and it takes into account everything from just the reporting of the draw and the usage and the utilization of a charge point, but also down to how to reimburse a driver at the back end, and even to an extent of being able to book a charger so that you know when your operational drivers are out and about, they can go into a depot and physically charge it at that point, rather than having to ask a company car driver ever so politely to move out so that you can actually charge your van to allow you to carry on and do your job. And for us, again, active load management will allow flex. So active load management, in really simplistic terms, is the ability to have a look at, let's say the maximum capacity for your depot is 10 chargers. Using active load management, you can potentially get 20 chargers in there, and it just reduces and aligns the actual charging per charger as you go through. Again, it's the same line at the bottom there, zero emission. When you think about infrastructure, think about a zero emission as your first choice. The biggest area, though, for us, and the one that's provided the most of the barriers to adoption is people. It's building that confidence and knowing that one negative experience will affect the whole process exponentially. And actually what you get to is a place where it's much harder to introduce those vehicles. And also think about operational changes that may be required. So do all of your vehicles actually need to go into a depot to pick up their supplies at the start of the day, or is there a different route to be able to do that? Is it drop boxes? Is it delivered to site? Those elements there. So all of that is reducing A, the number of charges you need at your depot, but B, it also reduces the range or it reduces the journeys that vehicle needs to do. He doesn't need to travel somewhere to carry on for their next role. They just go straight for their next role. And again, remember, not all those roles are suitable for the transition yet. It's all about myth busting. Operational drivers, they need that confidence in the product, the infrastructure, and potentially most important, they need to know that they're going to be repaid, especially if you have home charges. They're going to be repaid for the electricity that they're using at home to charge their vehicles. And for us, it was about getting drivers in vehicles. COVID has kind of put a slight delay on what we wanted to do, but the more drivers you get into those vehicles, the better and more willing to transition they are. The difference in that thinking is that handover needs to be detailed. No longer is it a case of arriving up with your new Sprinter and handing over the keys for the old Sprinter and then just driving away. Actually, there is a handover process, and whatever that looks like, in SSE we have videos that allow us to understand what that handover process looks like. And most drivers, again, will understand fully what goes on in the back of their van. They understand how to use the compressors, the inverters, and so on and so forth. But it's the front end now, which is potentially where they need that assistance and that guidance to build up that confidence and eliminate that nervousness overcharging. It's one of the biggest considerations that we have, and one of the biggest barriers we have. So from a learning perspective, aim the frequently asked questions. Make sure they're aimed at the driver, not at the operations manager or kind of the senior members of the board. They need to be aimed at the driver themselves. Ensure there's the handover process and create as many road shows. Utilize people like Jonny and other OEMs to get demos to you, and so that you can build up that critical mass. And zero emission as first choice. It sounds like a bit of a stuck record, but absolutely it's the right thing to be thinking about. So just to summarize as really quickly those learnings: early engagement with the OEMs, operational trials to understand the product in detail and accept that you can't do it today. Don't force it. Don't get a van in there and just force it in, because you will create so much negativity that actually you'll put yourself back. Infrastructures, put as much infrastructure in as you are able to, that the site allows you, and get the right back office solution that allows you to manage it today and then the active load management going forward. And from a people perspective, winning hearts and minds is the key to the adoption. Just keep smashing down those barriers. Every time a barrier comes up, think of a solution. There are plenty out there. There's lots of help and assistance to find what those solutions are, and get bums on seats. EVs, and all of the drivers we talk to that drive an EV say they are an amazing work tool. Paul touched on it earlier on. It's point and squirt. They're really, really easy to drive. It's all about making EV the new normal. So people first. The products and infrastructure are easier. Did I mention the fact that people are the first things? Break through those barriers, and you're probably 80% of the way there. And then actually what you get to is zero emission is the only choice that you need to consider. Hopefully that is of use to everybody. And back to Richard with some questions, I believe.
Superb. Thanks very much, Neil. There has been plenty of questions, and I will say at this point we're going to do a couple for you, Neil, then we invite the panel in. We may not get through all the questions that we've had in the remaining time, but be assured out there for the audience, we will take those and respond back out post the webinar. So first one, from a practical point of view, a large number of van fleets reside at employees' home addresses overnight, and I guess that's particularly true of SSE as well. How do you address this when the vehicle is not kept at a depot overnight, especially where staff are living in rental accommodation or have no off-street parking?
So I guess quite simply, this is where you're not going to force a vehicle into that driver. There are still some restrictions that are out there. It's probably not the answer that people are looking for, because they're hoping that as SSE we've come up with a great solution. We haven't so far. There are different questions and different surveys that potentially you could ask that driver, such as, are there local charging points that they can use? But as we transition across to this journey towards 2030, more and more of the faster chargers are going to be available, more of the hubs are going to be available. So actually, there may well be different ways for you to actually bring that on board. And my final point on it is there a journey or a location in the consistent route that driver takes that allows them to still do a bit of a charge at some point? So it's about thinking about things slightly differently, but again, going back to it, to reinforce it, don't force that vehicle in, because it won't.
Perhaps doing things in a little bit more granular level
Absolutely.
at the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. The last one for you specifically before we bring the other guys. As part of the evaluation that you did with SSE, did you evaluate the vehicle off-road times and and the speed of return when those vans went in for work? And did you notice any difference in a traditional petrol or diesel vehicle?
So the big difference is that they are off-road less, but when they go off-road, they're off-road for longer. And one of the reasons for that is primarily because as soon as the vehicle goes off-road, if there's anything to do with any of the electrical components within the vehicle, I'm not talking about the lights or anything like that, but the actual battery, the motive battery, the vehicle needs to be fully discharged before any work can happen on that. Now that could take half a day. So now you're actually lost half a day before the work even starts. The work then takes place. The van then needs to be charged before it can come back to you. Again, potentially, not every dealer has an ultra fast charger in there, 100 kilowatt charger. Most of them have 7 kilowatt chargers. That's another half a day. So, actually, to think of everything you've done or everything that's happened to that vehicle, even without a mechanic touching it, you've lost a day. So therefore, it takes longer.
Excellent, thank you. Paul, Johnny, can you come back in on your cameras? And firstly, before we get on, thank you for all three of you for such valuable input and insight into the world of ELCVs. There's loads of questions. I'm pretty sure we're not going to get through them in the time left, but we will answer them later on via email. So this one, guess, goes out to all of you for a different, I guess, from a different point of view. Interested to hear the panel's view on the readiness of OEMs dealer networks to cope with the switch to EV. I've heard some garages having to turn work away as they don't have capacity. Who wants to go first? Should we do EV cafe style? Put your hand up.
So I can take that one. We do find that with some of the networks. So part of the evaluation that you do when you before you look at actually introducing a vehicle into a specific operational area is that rightly have a look at the network that's available in that geographical location. The last thing you want to do, and it goes back to the VOR question, is have to put a vehicle on the back of a transporter for another day down to somewhere so that it can be fixed, and then another day back up. So some OEMs and some dealer groups are geared up and ready to go. Some of the others are lagging behind, I would suggest, and they can do minor changes, but they can't do some of the serious work that has to go to a central location.
Okay, so again, geographical is a real consideration when you're actually looking at bringing the vehicle. I'll make sure you can.
Absolutely.
I could add just a small thing to that, because as I'm looking ahead, because today we're in mid transition, yeah. But I think when you look at what some of the car makers are doing, like Tesla, for instance, are going without a dealer network. You've got Arrival planning coming without a dealer network predominantly. LEVC are operating without a dealer network. Maxus are operating with a much smaller dealer network. Is it going to be that the technology is available to do stuff on the hoof or through partners and different things? I don't know, but as I look ahead, I'm quite optimistic. I think at the moment it's a bit of a challenge, but as I look ahead and look at the technology that's available, the over-the-air stuff and all of that kind of thing, I think there are real possibilities. But I think at the moment, Neil's hit the nail on the head. There's some challenges around understanding and knowledge.
Okay. Paul, this one probably is for you, and I know it's one of your particular passion points. Comparing Cardiff with Amsterdam, there are 30 charge points compared with 1,000. Realistically, how quickly can places like Cardiff be brought up to speed to support business LCV fleets?
You know, I love Holland. I think they're doing, or Netherlands, I think is the official name for them. But they're doing such a fantastic job in electrifying their country and leading the way, much like Norway and others in Northern Europe. yeah, Cardiff. I mean, Bath is another interesting one, not far down the road from Cardiff. They have just a smattering of charge points in the centre of the city, and they're going to a clean air zone in 6 months or less. So I'm quite amazed at the lack of joined upness, but I do hope that there's a mix needed. Obviously, we've got the big hubs that are coming, but there is a mix of local and business infrastructure, people like Neil's company SSE and electrifying their depots, and innovation is needed. There's plenty of gaps, and I think there are innovators out there that will fill those gaps. But yes, more needs to be done. Neil.
I'd absolutely, piggyback again off of what Paul was saying. I think it's up to organisations like SSE and other fleets to make their depot charging accessible to all, or to have partnerships with other organisations so that we can share that infrastructure, because it's sometimes, I guess, and maybe this is controversial, it shouldn't always be up to us to rely on that public charging network. And from an SSE perspective, would I want an SSE van to be sat outside a kind of a retail park charging and taking up a public charging spot? No, I would much prefer that van is actually sitting out there and doing its job and sharing that infrastructure with someone else, with which other organisations are kind of joining up. So I personally would like to see more of that shared network across commercial areas.
There's definitely some creative solutions coming to market that haven't quite been visible yet, but there's definitely good conversation going on about creating realistic networks that will be effective, but are not just hubs.
Okay. I'm going to make this the last question to the panel, and it is really open, and it's really at the heart is this question of everything we've kind of been talking about today. And we're all fortunate in the organizations we work for in terms of the resource available to us and everything else. But this question is there any free software guides available to help non-specialized SME staff assess their fleet usage and make an informed choice about their change to EVs? I think that's where we've got the resource available to us. We're very lucky and fortunate in that respect, and and we've got the specialism. But I guess for those SMEs without individual roles for fleet, it becomes quite a hard challenge to transfer.
Yeah, I'm sure there's suitability assessment stuff out there. I would always like to direct those to our website. Does have some tools on there, specifically the real world range calculator, which I find is very useful. So you can think that comes to mind, Paul.
Yeah, well, there's definitely what we would term suitability assessments out there. And also what you'll find is that companies in a similar space to my own will look to help and support people do some of that evaluation, ask that grow model questions, what are your goals, what's the reality, what are your objectives. That's why we provided those vans. We've got one in at the moment with a company that we're evaluating it. They're using telematics to put their own data on. So I think there is, there are people who will collaborate, and that's a word I'd love for us to sort of really take on board in this transitional period. Collaboration is key, and it's great that we can sit as four non-competitors, really. But even when we have competition, there is still something to be said about collaborating one with another and sharing information and supporting one another where there are good solutions to take advantage of them and transition, especially to the smaller vehicle users.
I'd just like to quickly add, a good place to start is probably the 𝐥𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧𝐢𝐬 website as a good starting point.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion.
Yeah, and the other thing, I mean, you two will never promote it, I know, but the social media, the EV cafe, the level and breadth of debate around all aspects transitioning to EV, it's moderated, and it's thought-provoking, and again, that's an easy access way to gathering information. So there you go.
Education is key, Richard.
Yeah, it is.
And whatever we can do to educate, things like this, fabulous, really well put on by yourselves, Webfleet, and but we do that sort of generic version where everybody comes on and we'll give everybody a hard time, to prove that what they're saying is of value to the market, and it is a good an educational piece, and there's lots of education going on.
Brilliant, thank you. So if you did ask a question and we haven't got to it, I sincerely apologise. The questions have been fantastic here, but we've run out of time today, which I guess is endorsement to the panelists and the conversation that we're having. We will get them all out and looked at and answered as best as possible. This is kind of my part where I do an unashamed little pitch for Webfleet. What you'll see on the graph in front of you is actually the journeys from Webfleet that have been done, number of miles per day on average. And what you can see is we overlay some of the data that Paul has showed with us today, notwithstanding payload or any other usage restrictions, as Neil sort of described. You can see that there's a huge variety of vehicles that can take on some of the length of journeys that are being done as we see through the data. So, you know, as Webfleet, we are owned by Bridgestone. We have huge investment and continue to have investment in the EV proposition, both in terms of data to analyze whether it's suitable to go through onto an EV platform. And once they're on, demonstrating the right data sets to manage and monitor those EVs and plan the journeys so they're operationally effective with EV vehicles. So with that short pitch, just like to say thank you to all of the panelists who've come on today, given their time, really is appreciated. Thank you for everyone who's joined the webinar. Again, you know, hopefully you've learned something and enjoyed it, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you.